All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our next week of classes. We're going to be continuing our chapter 11, which is our human body systems. Today we're going to be talking about our circulatory system, our respiratory system, and we're going to be talking about some blood. So starting off with our circulatory system, we have, starting off with our respiratory system. So our respiratory system is really going to have the main goal of having the gas exchange. This gas exchange meaning that oxygen goes into the body and carbon dioxide goes out. Breathing, the definition of breathing is the alternation of inhaling and exhaling. So inhaling and exhaling. We have a lot of these different branching of the airways. You can see how it goes down. This you can kind of think of the branching as similar to a tree. So here we have our tree trunk, and our mouth can kind of be like the roots. So we are going to absorb all of those nutrients, or in this case, it would be oxygen. That oxygen is going to travel up through the trunk of the tree. That would be the trachea here, and then it's going to go down and it's going to bifurcate. It's going to expand into these really smaller leaves until it gets to the leaves. So smaller branches of these vessels that are going to carry that oxygen here. There is a lot of surface area in our lungs, and the surface area is really important for this gas exchange to take place. So surface area, what that really means is that there is going to be a lot of relationship, a lot of this association between the air and between this tissue within your lungs. So there's a lot of opportunity for the tissue to be able to absorb that oxygen, which is really important. All right, so we're going to jump into our micro quiz. Micro quiz number 8 is what we're going to be going over today. So question number 1 of micro quiz 8, cells working together create what? So a whole bunch of cells coming together, they're going to work together to have some common function. What does that create? What does that, what type of structure is that? The air exchange is going to occur between the lungs and those surrounding blood vessels. We have these blood vessels that are going to surround those leaves or those branches that are the bronchi of. And the way that this works is these blood vessels are going to then basically just absorb that oxygen. This air exchange has these two main different types of blood vessels. We have these arteries. These arteries are going to have oxygenated blood. Those are going to be those red vessels. And then we have those veins that are going to be those blue vessels. These are going to have more of that carbon dioxide. You can see these molecules right here. These molecules are going to, these red molecules here are going to be those oxygen molecules, and they're that gray compound right there is going to be the carbon. So that carbon is going to have those two oxygens next to it. CO2, O2. So the circulatory system, that is the broad term for anything that is going to circulate within your body. So one of the jobs of the circulatory system is to move oxygen from the lungs to the rest of our body cells. And this gas exchange is actually going to occur within these capillaries right here. So these capillaries are going to be where the veins and the arteries are going to meet together. And these capillaries are going to basically surround these alveoli. These alveoli are going to be these ball-like discs at the end of these branches here. So these alveoli you can kind of think of as the leaves. These alveoli are actually going to be little tiny sacs of air, And these little tiny sacs of air are going to have this great benefit of having a large amount of surface area. So again, little sacs of air are going to be covered by these capillaries. Capillaries are the type of blood vessels the only type of blood vessels where gas exchange can occur. So the veins and the arteries, these bigger blood vessels up here, the only job of those vessels is going to be to transport the blood. The or the blood capillaries rather, these capillaries are going to be the really small blood vessels that are going to be able to actually absorb the oxygen and absorb that CO2. We have quite a few diseases that can happen with our respiratory system. Emphysema is a very, very common disease, especially with older individuals that were exposed to tobacco smoke or other kinds of smoke, or even air pollution. We're seeing emphysema in higher amounts in areas like China and even California because of the high amounts of air pollution in those regions. The higher amount of emphysema in California has actually been attributed to the higher amount of air pollution that comes from the other side of the world, from China and from India and those other really big areas that are known for manufacturing. Bronchitis is going to be the inflammation of those bronchs. Those bronchs are going to be those branch-like structures within the lungs. And bronchitis is a type of inflammation that is most commonly caused by a viral infection. Upper respiratory infections, this is a generic term that just means that there's some infection within that upper respiratory tract, within not the lungs necessarily, but the trachea or your tonsils even cause that upper respiratory infection. This is likely going to be caused by, or the symptoms of this upper respiratory infection is going to be really nasally discharge, lots of blowing your nose, maybe some congestion there, that sort of thing. And this is most often caused by some type of pathogen, whether that's a virus or a bacteria. And asthma is a long-term illness that is caused by inflammation of the airway somewhere. And asthma is oftentimes going to be treated with steroids, which is what this inhaler is right here. Let's talk a little bit about how much air do you breathe during a deep breath. An adult male can usually hold about 6 liters of air in the lungs. That is a lot. So think about what a 2-liter looks like, and so there would be 3 of those 2 liters. But your lung volume is by a lot of things, including the overall size of you that you are. Larger individuals, people that are taller, people that have a wider bone structure, they're going to be able to have a larger lung volume. Gender as well. Males are going to have a larger lung volume than females. And then elevation. Elevation is really interesting. And people that live at higher elevations, like those that live in Colorado, live high up in the mountains, they're actually going to be able to hold a lot more lung volume, a lot more volume of air within their lungs than an individual that is from maybe Michigan, like Aunt Gray, that lives right at sea level. And this has to do with the pressure that's involved with living in those high altitude. And so an individual that is maybe training for the Olympics or training for something very, very competitive, they are often going to travel to these regions like Colorado where there is a high altitude, and that's where they do their training. And then if they were to compete in an area that isn't in high altitude, then they would do exceptionally well, much better than they would if they were to train in a low altitude setting. Let's talk about how an athlete's lung in general, not depending on where they are training. So how might an athlete's lung capacity compare to a non-athlete? As you might guess, an athlete's lung capacity is going to be much higher than that of a non-athlete. The more you work any system, the more that system is going to grow, right? So the more deep breaths that you take in, which happens when an individual is exercising, the more capacity that lung is going to be able to hold. So again, that circulatory system, that is going to be the system that is involved with circulating or transporting materials throughout the body. One example of our circulatory system is going to be the system that involves our heart and all of those blood vessels right here. So the heart is responsible for pumping blood. That blood gets pumped through these series of blood vessels. Veins and artery, those are both examples of blood vessels, as well as those capillaries that we talked about. The blood is really important, and that blood is going to carry nutrients as well as waste products from those cells, along with the oxygen and carbon dioxide as well. Your heart and your blood vessels working together is called your cardiovascular system. So your cardiovascular system is one aspect of the circulatory system.